If you have a pension, you are sitting on one of the most powerful and most misunderstood assets in retirement planning. And I see the same mistake over and over. People treat the pension decision like a coin flip, lump sum or monthly check. They guess, they Google it, or they just take whatever the HR packet defaults to. That one decision, made in a 5-minute phone call with a benefits office, can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime, and it's usually irreversible. So today, I'm breaking down exactly how to think about your pension. Lump sum versus monthly income, single life versus joint survivor, how pension insurance actually works, and a full case study so you can see these numbers play out in real life. I'm Tyson, and this is Tyson Retires. Let's get into it. The basic choice every pension holder faces. If you're one of the shrinking number of Americans with a traditional pension, congratulations, you have something Social Security-like, an income stream you cannot outlive. But most plans give you a menu of choices, and that menu usually looks something like this. A lump sum payout paid once that you roll into an IRAA joint and survivor monthly annuity, often offered at 100%, 75%, 50%, or sometimes 33% continuation for your spouse. A single life annuity, which pays the most per month but stops completely when you pass away. A period certain option, guaranteeing payments for a set number of years, like 10 or 20, even if you die early. Here's the first thing I want you to internalize. There is no universally correct answer. I've sat across the table from retirees where the lump sum was clearly the smarter move, and others where taking the monthly pension probably saved their retirement. The right answer depends entirely on your other assets, your age, your health, your spending needs, and your tolerance for risk. But there is a general rule of thumb that holds up well. The bigger your nest egg, the less you need the monthly pension. That doesn't mean you should automatically walk away from it, but it shifts the calculation. If your 401k and brokerage accounts can comfortably cover your lifestyle on their own, you have more room to take on the risk of managing a lump sum yourself. But the stock market returns more. This is the argument I hear constantly. Why would I take a monthly pension when the stock market averages way more than that every year? It's a fair question on the surface, but it compares two things that aren't actually comparable. First, pension insurance. If your pension is backed by a single employer and insured by the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, the PBGC, your monthly payment is protected up to a federal maximum, even if your employer goes out of business. For 2025, that maximum benefit is a little over $7,400 a month for a 65-year-old under a single employer plan. If your pension amount falls under that ceiling and your employer is covered, your income is essentially guaranteed for life, regardless of what happens to the company. That's worth calling your HR department to confirm, by the way. Ask directly, is this plan PBGC insured? Second, sequence of returns risk. This is the concept that trips up more retirees than almost anything else. Yes, the S&P 500 has historically averaged somewhere around 10.11% per year over long stretches. But averages are not reality. Real markets move in clusters, several good years, then a sharp drawdown, then recovery. If you retire right before or right after a downturn, and you're pulling income from a shrinking portfolio, you can deplete your savings far faster than the average return would ever suggest. Two retirees with identical starting balances and identical average returns can end up in wildly different places purely based on when the bad years happened. A guaranteed pension check doesn't care what the market did last quarter. That's the trade you're actually making, not guaranteed low return versus higher average return, but guaranteed income versus income that depends on timing you can't control. Third, you're not limited to the stock market. If you take the lump sum, you don't have to dump it into index funds. You could roll it into a private annuity instead, which brings its own trade-offs, including one major advantage pensions typically don't offer. Your money can pass to your heirs. The legacy problem. Here's the biggest complaint I hear from clients who've stuck with the standard pension. If you and your spouse both pass away, whatever's left simply disappears. It reverts to the pension plan. Your kids get nothing from it. That's a real drawback, but it's also solvable. If you take the lump sum instead and use part of it to purchase a private annuity with a joint income option and a death benefit, you can often replicate, or even beat, the monthly income of the original pension, while still leaving something behind for your family. Let me give you a simplified example. Say a couple is offered a lump sum of $280,000, or a joint life, 100% survivor pension paying $1,200 per month. That pension is effectively paying about 5.1% annually on that lump sum for both of their lifetimes. Now, if that same couple shops private annuity quotes, it's entirely possible to find an option paying, say, $1,350 a month with the same joint protection, plus whatever remains in the account passes to their children when both have passed. In a case like that, the private annuity wins on both income and legacy. But that outcome isn't guaranteed. You have to actually run the numbers, because annuity pricing shifts constantly with interest rates. Timing. When you retire matters. Your age at retirement changes this calculation significantly. If you're retiring before age 59 and a half, a monthly pension can act as a bridge to Social Security in a way that's very hard to replace. Here's why. You likely have years before Social Security kicks in. You can't access a private annuity penalty-free before 59 and a half. Pulling from a traditional IRA before that age is possible, but it requires structured, locked-in withdrawal strategies, and it's not guaranteed for life the way an annuity or pension is. A lot of people overlook this entirely and don't realize their pension could be the single thing that makes an early retirement possible. Not just a nice-to-have, but the bridge that gets them from their last paycheck to their first Social Security check without draining their portfolio at the worst possible time. Single life versus joint. The mistake that can't be undone. This next one keeps me up at night, honestly, because I've seen it go badly. A single life pension pays more per month, sometimes noticeably more, but it stops the moment you die. No survivor benefit. Nothing. I recently ran a stress test for a couple in their late 40s. The husband had a substantial pension, around $75,000 a year, but if he passed away, his spouse would drop to just $5,000 a year. When I modeled an early death at age 55 or 60, his wife's entire lifestyle would have had to change overnight, even with a solid portfolio behind them. To replace $75,000 a year in guaranteed income, you typically need around $1.5 million in additional assets. That's the size of the hole a single life election can leave. This is why the survivor election matters so much, and why it has to be right the first time. Once you sign that paperwork, it's locked in. There's no redo. Full case study, putting it all together. Let's walk through a complete example so you can see how all of this fits together. Meet Mark and Diane, both 57, retired, living in a no-state income tax state. They have 2 adult children and want to leave each of them at least $250,000, so $500,000 total in legacy goals. Their base annual expenses are $80,000, expected to drop to about 70% of that once they hit their 80s, adjusted for 3% inflation along the way. They also want to travel, budgeting $115,000 a year for the first decade of retirement, then half that for the following decade. Their assets: joint savings, $100,000, joint brokerage account, $95,000, Mark's 401k, roughly $1.1 million, Diane's IRA, about $400,000. Paid off home, $850,000. Total investable assets, about $1.7 million. Mark has a pension decision to make. Take a joint 100% survivor benefit of $36,000 a year, with a 2% annual cost of living adjustment, or take a lump sum of $500,000. Using retirement stress testing software modeled on a severe downturn similar to 2008-2009, here's what the numbers show. Scenario A. Take the monthly pension. Projected to age 95, this plan shows a 98% probability of success. Since that's well above the 80% threshold most planners target, this couple actually has room to increase spending, from $80,000 up to around $100,000 a year in base expenses before travel. Scenario B. Take the lump sum. Invest in a balanced portfolio averaging 7.5%. This produces an 89% probability of success, still solid, but noticeably lower. To hit that same 80% comfort threshold, their sustainable spending tops out around $84,000 a year, about $16,000 less annually than the pension scenario allows. Now here's where it gets more dramatic. What if both Mark and Diane need long-term care between ages 85 and 88, and they have no long-term care insurance? With the pension, their success rate drops to 70%, but if they sell their home to help cover costs, it climbs back to about 79%, right around target. With the lump sum, their success rate falls to just 42%. Even after selling the home, it only recovers to about 54%. To get back to an acceptable range, they'd need to cut their annual spending by roughly $15,000 for the rest of retirement. That's the real-world impact of guaranteed income during the years you need it most. The pension doesn't just provide a paycheck. It provides a floor that market-based income can't guarantee, especially during a long-term care event. Your decision framework. So how do you actually decide? Here's a simplified framework. Check PBGC coverage. Confirm whether your specific pension is insured and know the benefit cap. Assess your total nest egg. The larger and more tax-diversified your other assets, the more you can consider the lump sum route. Think about your age at retirement. If you're retiring early, a pension can bridge the gap to Social Security in a way nothing else can. Decide how much you value legacy versus guaranteed income, and explore whether a private annuity with a death benefit could thread that needle. Never choose single life over joint life carelessly if you're married. Model out what happens to your spouse if you pass first. Stress test the plan against a market downturn and against a long-term care event before you sign anything. The person who should almost always take the lump sum is someone who genuinely has more than enough, diversified across pre-tax, Roth, and brokerage accounts, with expenses comfortably inside their income. Everyone else needs to run the actual numbers before deciding. A pension decision isn't something you get to revisit in 5 years if it turns out wrong. That's exactly why it deserves more than a guess. If this helped clarify how to think about your own pension, hit subscribe. I break down real retirement numbers like this every week on Tyson Retires. And if you want help running your own scenarios, drop a comment and let me know what you'd want to see modeled next.